Apples. You just pictured one in your mind, didn't you? Many of us enjoy eating apples. Maybe just a raw apple, or a caramel or candied apple, or applesauce or apple pie. Apple cider, apple slush. Apple fritter, apple dumpling. There are many ways that we enjoy apples. The wide variety of apples that are grown appeal to a very wide variety of tastes. There is nothing like the mouth-watering taste of a fresh, juicy apple, or peach or pear for that matter, right off the tree. Several small orchards may be found in the Great Miami Valley in southwestern Ohio. We are going to visit a few of these orchards, as well as a few apple festivals celebrating the arrival of the apple harvest. No discussion about apples would be complete without including John Chapman, also known as Johnny Appleseed. We'll visit Urbana University, where we will investigate the man and the myth as we explore the Johnny Appleseed Museum. To wrap things up, we'll observe a mom and an apple pie and see if we can figure out why mom and apple pie seem to go together. Due to the limited budget we had to work with on this production, we ask your indulgence for any imperfections you may observe. Our limited editing staff was sometimes lax in cutting out the crew members sneaking into the shots. Sometimes it seems like a Where's Waldo video bombing by crew members. We apologize for that. Nick Monin carries on the family tradition of operating Monin's Fruit Farm in Dayton, Ohio. Monin's has many apple varieties as well as you pick of some of their items, including apples, strawberries, and pumpkins. Blackberries and peaches are also popular at Monin's.
My dad and his dad started the place, and we're just continuing on. He wanted the farm to keep going, so we're going to keep the farm going as long as possible. We've been here for 53 years, and we have 1,500 apple trees, 450 peach trees, and somewhere in the acres have probably got about 5 acres of raspberries and 3 acres of strawberries.
Tukin's Orchard and Farm Market west of Dayton is just over 10 years old. Frank and Mary Hora converted an old barn into a modern farm market and grow apples, peaches, pears, blackberries, pumpkins, cherries, plums, and more.
We thought of creating a place where kids could go to know how and where their food comes from. Our concept of the orchard is basically to allow people to go out and pick their own fruit, see it growing on the tree, experience just seeing the beauty of that, and then picking it, and you can actually wipe it off on your clothes and eat it immediately. And once children do that, they never forget it.
We'll give Frank a turn a little later. Hidden Valley Fruit Farm south of Dayton in Lebanon has Bob Ulrich at its head. They too grow many apple varieties, peaches, pears, grapes, and more.
Well, I came here and bought this farm in 1978, and if you remember that year, there was a blizzard and Ohio, State Route 48 was closed, and we could barely get in the parking lot, and so everybody thought that I was crazier than crazy. So, because none of us even had the equipment to handle it. But as time went on, that spring thawed, and we began to prune apples and to do a lot of grafting of apple trees.
You may think that apples just grow on trees. Well, yes, I guess they do, but not without a lot of help and nurturing. These orchard men and women, or growers, or farmers, or what have you, are the power that makes it happen. Without their expertise, hard work, and direction, this fruit don't grow. But this is what they do, and they do it well. They can tell you what kind of apple that is, and what it is best used for, and when they will be available, and for how long, and a whole lot more. Let's get a small taste of some of the things they consider as they grow their fruits and vegetables.
You can buy certain size trees now. You can buy them by the stick, and they're going to be a little cheaper, but it's going to be another 3 years before you get any apples. So we try to buy the 7/8 inch stalk, And that gives you, within 2 or 3 years, you'll start getting a few apples off of them. And then from then on, we're you know, just pruning them and trying to keep them down as close to the ground as possible for pick your own.
My name's Frank Hurrah. I'm the grower here at Toucan's Orchard and Farm Market. We started this market in 2005 when we first planted our trees, but there was a year and a half of planting that went into selecting the rootstocks and the varieties of apples that we have. And here I'd like to show you is a newer variety that's been produced by the University of Minnesota. And the apple that they're noted for would be the Honeycrisp, and they also have the Zestar, which we have all of those on the orchard as well. But the unique thing about the new development of the Honeycrisp, or the Snow Sweet apple, which this is that it has a low oxidizing period. In other words, the sugars in it don't make the apple turn brown when you bite in it. So for a fresh cut apple or something, you want to keep its color in it. And it has a wonderful flavor. Any customer that's had it, enjoy it. It's a sweet, little bit tart type apple. This is the blossom end of the apple. Typically it's closed real tight. The blossom starts and then it closes real tight. As you can see, as this starts to open up, that's an indication of its ripening and finishing out. When that gets wide open, it's at its peak of sugar. And some apples, once they've ripened out, won't stay on the tree and they'll simply unattach themselves and fall to the ground. And then there's other things that can take your apples, but it's called fire blight, what it is. And you get a new shoot and all of a sudden it just turns brown. It's a virus. And we had a touch of it about 5 years after the orchard was planted. Lost a few trees, but just in general, the freeze damage and rodent damage has probably caused most of the mortality in what trees have passed. 2014, 13 and 14 winter, we had a week of weather, 20 and 30 below zero. So that killed all the fruiting buds that year, and it literally killed all of the white cherry trees. Our orchard has some stories. For example, I had 18 people hand planting the trees, and this was quite an operation when I managed it to all plant within a couple of weeks, all of it, from blackberries and raspberries to the stone fruit. But I had a foreman that came with me from the home farm that I left and started a new life of farming up here with my wife. And apparently he liked to go to the bar and enjoyed his drinking there. So our trees are supposed to be on a 5.5 foot center. And I had a crew of people working, and they're planting 100 trees every 20 or 30 minutes. Well, I came back and somehow he was in charge of marking the 5.5 foot space, and we had a couple rows that were about 9 foot apart. Then I quit letting him take lunch breaks off the farm.
We grow, of course, apples is, I think, our biggest crop. And we follow that probably with blueberries. Grapes are a big crop for us. Of course, any tree fruit like peaches, it's all about what you want as the customers want.
Hidden Valley is somewhat unique in that they make unpasteurized apple cider on the premises. Lisa Shetterly was kind enough to give us an overview of cider making before her untimely death. Lisa was at Hidden Valley even before Bob took the reins, so she has been sorely missed both personally and professionally by everyone she worked with and the scores of customers she came to know over the years. Let's listen to what Lisa had to say about making apple cider at Hidden Valley.
When we make cider, we use all clean, sound apples. The apples are all washed off the grater, and then we wash them again as they go into the cider press. There's a washer section with rollers that they roll across, and they're washed. We try to use 2 sweet apples for every tart apple we use to get a good blend. Some of the better varieties are Johnny Golds and Golden Delicious. Melrose make excellent cider. Fuji's make excellent cider. So it's always a blend of apples. Every batch is a little different. You can't get it exactly the same. So every batch is good, but this year we had a batch that was made out of Honeycrisp that was supreme. It was like really good. So then the apples go across the conveyor, and we have 2 or 3 cutters that cut any spots or anything out of the apple. No bad spots. Nothing's allowed to go into the cider. They drop down into a hammer mill, and it actually has a paddle with a screen, and it smushes the apples into small little chunks, and they're pumped over onto the racks with the cloths. We keep going. We stack them. They're folded, And then when we get to be about 7 racks high, they go underneath the hydraulic press that comes out of the floor, and it squishes all the juice out of the apples. The juice goes into a holding pan underneath the rack, and then it's pumped up immediately into the cooler so it stays cold. Our cider is all 100% pure. There's nothing added at all. No preservatives. It's not pasteurized. We're selling it, just like it comes out of the apple. So it's truly apple cider. Then after that, it's held into the tanks. We try to get it blended good, usually for 24 hours, and then we jug it. It's all hand jugged. We do it all by hand. Nothing's done, automated, so it's still the good old-fashioned way. So cider needs to be kept around 40 degrees or below. If you're going to keep it for longer than 10 days, you should freeze it. It freezes real well, and when it comes out of the freezer, it tastes just like it was when it was made. So,
Enon is home to the famous Apple Butter Festival. Participation by firefighters, Boy Scouts, politicians, and many other members of the community has made this popular festival a top spot for decades.
This is the Enon Community Historical Society's annual Apple Butter Festival. It started in 1979. We start from scratch about 3 o'clock in the morning, start the fires, about 5 we start cooking, and you have to stir for 8 hours, basically, constantly. You can't stop, and then they can it right here on the spot. You can use it on toast or muffins or, anywhere you want to add some spice and pizzazz.
We start in April, actually starting the festival. And then we're already designing for next year. We're one of the longest running festivals in this area.
In less than a minute, let's get an overview of the festivities. The Allwood Audubon Center and Farm celebrates apple harvest time with the Allwood Apple Fest in Dayton. There you can celebrate all things apple with lots of family entertainment.
Well, welcome to Apple Fest. We're making apple butter here today, and what we have 3 kettles over here, and in each kettle we put about 100 pounds of apples, which is about 3 bushels, and 8 gallons of apple cider.
Travel south of Dayton to Houston Woods in Oxford for another Apple Butter Festival that consistently draws big crowds and directs proceeds to the Oxford Museum Association.
It's a beautiful fall day, a bunch of apples, a bunch of cider, and you got yourself an Apple Butter Festival.
Another festival that attracts enormous crowds is the one-day-only Warren County Apple Fest with apple treats and entertainment galore. At Ohio's Urbana University, we met with
Cheryl Ogden, Director of the Johnny Appleseed Educational Center and Museum. John Chapman, Johnny Appleseed's real name, was born in a little town called Leominster, Massachusetts in 1774. He got into the Ohio area about 1801, so he was here before Ohio was even a state. He was a businessman, which is something a lot of people don't realize about him. When he came into the area, it was with the idea of planting his apple seeds and selling the seedlings when they got to be about 3 to 5 years old. He was ahead of the settlers, which for them was beneficial because the settlers coming in needed to have apple trees to prove that they were going to stay on their land to prevent claim jumping. And he provided that service for them. He usually sold them for 1 to 3 cents a tree. When he got into Ohio, he spent much of his time around the Mansfield, Ohio area. He never went in a straight line when he would be traveling back and forth between Ohio and Pennsylvania for his seeds. It was always in a circuitous route so that he would check on the nurseries he had planted previous years, and then he would move a little bit further west each time. He died in 1845 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, at the home of a friend. The belief is that he caught pneumonia from being out in the storms that were happening in the early part of March that year. We are located here because John Chapman was friends with the founders of Urbana University. They shared a religion, the Swedenborgian religion, and John James, the gentleman who donated the property for the university, had John Chapman plant an orchard just up the road from where we are right now. One of the hardest things to do with John Chapman is prove that he's been anywhere. You get a lot of rumors, a lot of, yeah, he was here, he planted this tree or that tree, but we know for a fact through letters that John James kept that John Chapman was up on High Street and planted an orchard for John James up there. So we know he has traversed this land and been in this area. They were primarily used for cider. The apple eating it raw happened, but not overwhelmingly. They used it some for baking, applesauce, sometimes pies, but mainly it was cider and apple cider vinegar. He was important to us because he teaches tolerance. He teaches generosity, things that we as a university also want to teach to our students. There is a tree up near Mansfield, Ohio. It's on a farm owned by Richard and Phyllis Algeo. That is a tree that we can say with about 98% certainty was planted by John Chapman. The family's kept good records, and we know that he had been there and had been asked to plant trees for them. And this particular seed was planted on an aquifer, and the root system is exceptionally strong. So every time the trunk tries to die off, they just allow one of the new suckers that is coming up to become the trunk, and eventually it takes over. The tree is still living, it's still producing, and we have grafted from that in order to propagate what we refer to as our genuine Johnny trees. And the apple trees that are outside the museum are all genuine Johnny trees.
Sometimes we talk about mom and apple pie. So here we have a mom, who happens to be my mom at 91, making an apple pie. Making the crust from scratch, of course, using the classic wooden rolling pin. Put in some cut up apples, who knows what kind, top crust getting perforated, little butter, cinnamon, and sugar. And into the oven it goes. Looks perfect, doesn't it? And it was delicious. Thanks, Mom, and thanks for watching.